Okay, we're absolutely delighted to have Ken joining us. I think all of you know that Ken Rieke is arguably the most successful business aviation entrepreneur and investor. But unless you follow him on Instagram, you don't see the real him. He also has the most glamorous life you've ever seen, jetting around. And so we're absolutely delighted to have Ken joining us now. Although it's so dark, I have no idea if you're walking up at all. Ah, here he is, great. And you look at the tie and the tailoring, the only person who's close to that is Michael Amalfitano.
Hi, Mike. Yeah, well, this is the worst slot. I'm keeping everybody from the bar.
No, you're bringing it in, and also, the longer we go on, the cheaper the drinks bill is.
Okay.
How's business?
Well, only the paranoid survive, so I say it's very good, but paranoia always sets in when you're an entrepreneur, so you're wondering what the next shoe will drop. I think that on a macro sense, there certainly has been some proof in my eyes that the fractional model is a worthy model. It's the only model that really fully burdens all the costs. So what happened was that all these years, because they're buying the asset, you have capital to replenish the asset. And so then you always have a nice pipeline. And all those kind of facts came together macroly at one time. And so because the model regenerates itself, you have capital to buy new aircraft, you can increase your sales. And so I think it was just in a great balance sheet. It was in a very strong position at the right time. On a micro level, there's probably, there's probably some things. I listened to a couple of the panels. I talked here a couple of years ago, I think, Al, about the influence of fleet operators and how I thought they were taking on more importance. And so one of the things that happens is a fleet operator has more bargaining power with the manufacturers for maintenance, for fuel, for costing. So that helps the industry on a micro level. On a micro level, the increase in pilot compensation has helped a lot, because it doesn't take a buyer too long to understand that, the higher paid pilots somehow translate to feel like a safer bet. Confidentiality, more and more. A lot of I heard them talk about the corporates, but a lot of large corporations have shares with us now that they use when they don't want to be tracked. And there's also this trend that started this year. I heard it for the first time, but it's real, is the Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. So when these large corporations come to fractional, they move their emissions from Scope 1 to Scope 2. And therefore, if you think in the future that'll be taxed or not taxed, it protects that from the taxable side, because the operator would be taxed, not the emitter.
I think everyone agrees that the fractional market has had a few great years since COVID, and it's, you guys are doing amazingly well, your big competitor is, but it's not an easy business to build, is it? You've been an overnight success.
Oh no, everybody should be in the fractional business. Yeah, I always tell people it's a 40-year overnight success story. It only took 40 years to get here. Yes, there's a tremendous amount of moving parts. One of the things the aircraft brokers were talking about was maintenance. I mean, just think about it. A third of our fleet will not operate on any day. That's just the size and scope of what maintenance is today. It's also one of the positives, because whole aircraft operators faced with this 1-year downtime pick it up on fractional. And so they transfer that problem that they had. What am I going to do when I don't have an engineer here? That's become all our problem now. So yeah, it is a complex business from that perspective.
And it's one that it takes years. And when does fractional start working? Because we've seen, without naming them, we've seen startups having a torrid time in the last few years.
The real answer to that, it probably took 150 aircraft operating. I mean, there was never, because you need a strong balance sheet, and because you need that to buy aircraft, to lease aircraft, because not all your owners buy, some of them go into a long-term lease, and so you need to have the balance sheet to support that. So you need to be profitable, but I could tell you it was never it was never wonderfully profitable. It was profitable. It seems like something around 150 aircraft, and that has to do with how many fleets that's spread over too. I mean, in ours, it's spread over 5 fleets, and now we're at 300 aircraft. But if you were to kind of look at profitability, it was really from 150 on where it starts to become where the one-way travel works in your favor. One of the big growth of fractional has been in the international market. And so that's come on strong. But yes, it takes a long time to get the base you need.
And talking about the base, you've got FX Air, what was Private Fly, you've got Sentient, and you bought Sentient during a tough market as a way of driving traffic.
Yeah, I had no business, so I needed hours. Yeah.
How important are they to moving customers up your own pyramid?
Well, I could talk for an hour on our strategy, but basically what we think about is that we have a core fleet of aircraft that's in our fractional business. If you go to NetJets and you look at them, they will sell you a jet card and they will sell you an on-demand charter through the EJM. We've always thought that was bad branding because you sell a jet card different than you sell a fractional share. Fractional share is a long-term buy. The transaction's more complicated. A jet card can happen overnight. It can happen over the phone. That's not how fractional works. And so we felt by having different brands, so we won't sell you a jet card at FlexJet, nor will we sell you a charter. You have to go through the other brands because they have different go-to-market strategies. And I think by having those different strategies, we're able to hold margin. Because if I came to sell you a fraction, you said, what I really want is a jet card, I'll sell you the jet card if I'm in NetJets. We won't do that. And so we can maintain the profitability. We maintain the margin in each one of the silos.
I think we had a great question in the last session. How's your customer profile changed since COVID?
Surprisingly, it's gotten younger. I would say almost 10 years younger, which is a great thing because they'll be with us longer. So it's gotten larger. We sell 4 times as many mid and super mid aircraft than we do light jets. Okay, so they've gotten bigger, they've gotten younger, and they're going international. So that's really the changes. And the other thing that's probably not politically correct to say is that there's a lot of inherited wealth showing up. There's a lot of clients before you could Google them and find out what they did for a living. There's a huge wealth transfer going down, and they're buying the planes their parents didn't.
Okay, so the title of this session is Private Aviation Assassins.
Yes, you only gave me 10 minutes. I wanted an hour and a half.
The things that are killing our industry.
Yeah.
What are the biggest threats?
Well, you want to know who the assassins are or what the threats are?
Let's do assassins.
Assassins first. So I think there's 2 major assassins in our industry, and one of them they were talked about earlier, and it really starts at the OEMs. And we're just starting to see now something that happened 10 years ago. What the OEMs did 10 years ago was they sold off their NERE expense, right? The non-recurring engineering expense. They went to the landing gear partner, they went to the APU partner, and they told them, if you'll do the R&D for the APU for our new airplane, we'll give you exclusivity for the overhaul and the maintenance going forward. And we didn't realize that, but now as these planes are staying in service longer and somebody was saying parts inflation, it's not parts inflation, it's just the fact that all this NRE now is coming to light. I'll give you an example. There's 2 super mid-class aircraft that we operate. They have the exact same part number for like a thrust reverser actuator, because as you can imagine, it's got the same engine, right? One sold their NRE, it's a $229,000 actuator, and the other one's an $89,000 actuator. So our 229 never breaks, the 89,000 is the only one that ever breaks. And it happens, you can go, and you can tell right away which aircraft are NRE'd, which have had deals come offline, which deals have come out, and which haven't. So that for sure. You know, it's happened in other places. I mean, the parts is the biggest one, and it's been deferred. It happens in the engines right now. I mean, you're nuts to be on an engine program nowadays because it does nothing for you. And the craziest thing is...
We've got quite a lot of engine sponsors.
I understand. That's why we have alcohol. I think that...
These are the views of Ken Reiki and not necessarily of the...
I think that when you get to most of these airplanes come with warranty, but yet you pay for the engine program too. And now that the engines aren't available, the loaners aren't available, the aftermarket support isn't available, they need to adapt their program. So now I'll give them some advice. They need to adapt the program so that if they're going to be on program, it has to include some priority. Otherwise, you might as well just stay off program. Because I tend to believe if you're going to counter some of this, we have to do what's done in the commercial airlines. Right? We have to create aftermarket PMA parts. And by the way, there was a time when you didn't want a PMA part, right? Because it was not approved. But if you're faced with keeping your airplane down for an hour, a year, or using a PMA part, you're going to do the PMA part. And as you get more and more fleet operators that control a lot more of this, they're going to have the demand for this. And so there'll be an industry that could be created here, like it is in the commercial airline industry, that will allow these aftermarket ability to solve this problem.
But actually, I remember when PMA parts became big in commercial aviation, a lot of lessors would state that we're not having PMA on our aircraft. So you've got that issue with the financiers.
Except the difference is, we're the lessor. We don't have a third-party lessor. FlexJet holds its own leases, right? So we don't have to make that demand. And remember, we're taking all the residual risk on the aircraft anyhow. So it probably creates the opportunity for that to come into being.
So does that mean that you're going into PMA part manufacturing?
I'm always looking for opportunities. I mean, I'll give you a great example. We re-engined the 400, the Beechjet 400, right? That was the largest of PMA. Those opportunities are out there, and we were very successful in the Nexton program, and I'd do it again happily.
Interesting that we talk about the airline industry, because in the airline industry, you have the big airlines who can push back against OEMs. So, Bombardier did a really interesting press conference at Base, and by 2030, Bombardier is expecting 50% of its revenues to come from either military or services. There's not many business jet buyers who can push back against an OEM who wants, on their own MRO, is there?
Yes, but there's going to be, because I think you're still. Let's just go down the pilot salary route again. It's becoming very tumultuous. I mean, you've read about NetJets. You know what they had to go through with pilots. We readily publish our pilot salaries today, which are our senior international pilots are closer to $400,000 a year. Our starting salary is $185,000 for our pilots. So that in some ways empowers us. Pilots are going to stay there. They don't really want to go on to a corporate job. Our retention rate is phenomenal for our flight crews, okay? And so fleet operators, I think, are in particular, and there's more of them coming, right? There are a lot of there are startup fractionals, there are there are fleet operators that are evolving, and they're going to have this power. So I think it will be possible.
Okay, so let's see how many other sponsors we can upset.
One assassin down?
Yeah, we've done OEMs.
Yes. Well, the next one would be private equity. Okay? Private equity would be the next one, because if you really kind of look at it, and let's look at everything private equity's gone into. By the way, I was
going to say, we're talking about directional aviation capital.
But if you take a look, let's just start with the FBO, with the chains. If you go back 5 years ago, take the spread between Platts and the posted retail. And that spread was $2.75. Today it's $4.49. Now that's posted, okay, so it's really the only measure. And we know that there's discounts, and then back to our fleet operators who have buying power, again, in there. But then private equity, who are very smart, caught on to that. And they said, well, we're starting to see margin degradation, because even though we've made the spread $4.49, we're not birthing that amount. So then they started with event fees. Then they started with tacking on cost to catering. And so if you want to know why a turkey sandwich is $175, it's because of private equity. Okay, that's why. and then, the next one out, private equity's there. They're now in the maintenance area. Okay, and in the maintenance area, they're consolidating. There's been a lot of consolidation of MROs. And hourly maintenance prices in 5 years, $105 an hour, over $220 an hour, okay? If you were to grab the CIM, if you grab the SIM, because there's maintenance companies that are on the market now being remarketed by private equity, you would find a 5-year projection that showed you labor costs over $350 an hour. So we know where this is going.
Why did they send the IM to you to look at?
Listen, why did I get it? I know a guy.
But that's interesting, because I think we won't name it, but I think we know the one you're talking about, which is a large MRO. But it's going to be sold to another private equity chain or an OEM.
Yes.
So there's no exit here.
Right. I mean, but let's go the other way now. There's opportunity, because there is opportunity in this space. When you recognize the trend that's going on, that's where you can find the opportunity. We just need entrepreneurs to find the PMA. That we need entrepreneurs to call FlexJet and want to sell us PMA parts.
FBOs are hard because there's a limit, by nature that it's a limited market. You've got, it's very fragmented, but really the ones that matter, it's hard to get in there.
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think airports, if you look, on a grand scale, concrete's our problem, right? I mean, we can talk about airspace when we talk about that, but, concrete is going to be the problem, and it's one of the threats to business aviation that we don't often talk about. We hear about jet shaming, we hear about environmental, but we still have a concrete problem. And and I believe infrastructure, it's growing. In fact, even at the little airport we're at now, they're expanding, we're in a little neighborhood, lots of residents around the way, but they still are expanding the airport. Well, as they create more taxiways, more areas, there's going to be opportunities for privatized FBOs. We have 10 private facilities in places like White Plains, Teterboro, Naples, Florida, Palm Beach, Miami. So you can these private terminals, there's going to be opportunities there, and the way to get there is through the airport authorities, because they have budgets. And so I think they'll be there. It's a longer road. It's harder to get to. And then the other one we overlook is just like in PMA and in airports. I think it's time. I mean, it's time to go back to regulation. There actually is an FAA regulation that allows things like component overhaul manuals to be available to all. It's just no user group has banded together to kind of to help legislate and try to politicize it a little bit. And so I think you can politicize the airport problem. I think you can politicize the maintenance problem.
Do we have any questions in the room? Again, we've got no idea. You may have to shout out. It's so dark. It's interesting because you had an FBO chain. It's hard to remember what chains you haven't had in the industry. But you had an FBO chain, and you're going into that now. Catering. Are we going to see you investing in a FlexJet catering chain?
Yes, because there's no option. There's no option. Catering today for us, it's the worst experience. It's horrible. We have it's expensive. It's not fresh. And so absolutely, in fact, there's, at FlexJet today, I usually spend most of my time involved in capital deployment, like where are we going to put our capital at, number one, and then long-term strategy, like airports, marketplaces, aircraft types, our transactions with OEMs. That's where I spend my time. I've had to spend time on catering because it's such a problem. So here's a good question. So we spend $43 million a year on catering, and we spend $6 million on one item. What would you guess it is? And by the way, it's the largest spend of the 43, because you imagine there's 250 items that go into an airplane, but one of them is $6 million a year. What is it? Water, champagne, silverware or plasticware. Because what happens is every time you order a turkey sandwich, they can charge you $6 for the plastic wrapped napkin, fork, and spoon. And so they show up with everything. 2 turkey sandwiches, 6 serving pieces, so in case you want to split them. Yeah, so absolutely.
So you're spending time on negotiating catering?
Well, I'm spending time on turkey sandwiches and Gulfstreams. That's my day.
Aircraft manufacturers have got amazing backlogs. We're seeing great book-to-build ratios. How receptive are they to fleet orders?
I think they're very receptive. First of all, it's a love-hate relationship, but we love them. They hate us. No, that's not true.
Michael was nodding.
No, they recognize they're in a great environment right now. And this too shall pass. I've been around long enough to have 4 recessions. They all come. There'll eventually be something. But we're, it's very stable. Right now, fractional has a backlog. We've never had that before. Normally a plane's coming and we're like, God, we're going to have to discount it, or how are we going to get this guy? Now my friends used to call me for a discount. Now they call to see if they can be moved up in the queue, right? So there's our backlogs there too. And they know, the manufacturers know our normal replacement. We have a 5-year, 10-year cycle. So we are constantly redoing that cycle. So we're going to be there. Remember, we're a conduit for our owners. We're a conduit for 2,000 individual buyers, which, by the way, the manufacturer, the OEM, would have a hard time getting to those 2,000 hours. So we do perform a service for them. And there's a lot of cooperation that goes on. There's a lot of stuff that we do negotiate. There's a lot of stuff we do work with them on in terms of reliability, in terms of what parts for them to focus on, right? Because whatever problem we have in 3 years, the fleet is going to experience in 6. So we're a great test bed for what's coming down the road and what they need to engineer into.
We've got a question from someone saying, is fractional demand hurting the charter industry?
I would say that I don't think it's hurting the charter industry. I think the charter industry has shrunk a little bit because of some of the aircraft that were bought that was to be paid for, during COVID. And maybe that's a very hard math to make work out, is that you can afford an aircraft just by charter. And also, I really go back to the pilot issue has moved a lot of the very, very long-term contract customers into fractional. But by the same token, there's a lot of work. I mean, even as much during going into COVID as you could imagine, right? Because there was so much demand and aircraft were so hard to come. We got to a point where probably 13% of our total flying at times would not be on our own fleet. And that was great for the charter companies, but that's not normal, and we weren't going to live there. We're going to live at 2%. But 2% of our volume today is probably close to what 13% was 5 years ago.
Okay, we've got someone saying, actually the next two work nicely. How would you describe current interest amongst young people to work in business aviation?
To work in business aviation? I think it's phenomenal. I think that it's a very sexy industry, which you want to say, if we're at a party and there's me and the yarn salesman, they're talking to me, okay? And I think it's an easy industry to...
The margin's better in yarn.
The margins are better in yarn. But I think it's an easy industry to get people attracted to. I think we're getting a much more talented. We actually do some recruiting now, and we're getting people out of prestigious universities. We have a larger middle management role. We have a larger sales and marketing, and we're doing some international. But bringing people into that industry has not been complicated.
I mentioned your social media and your Instagram. Chris Dusker is asking, what's been the biggest success from I'll Tell You Over a Drink?
The biggest success?
Yeah.
From I'll Tell You Over a Drink? Well, I'll tell you over a drink what the biggest success is. The biggest success, you talk about young people appeal, that's what it's been. Young people, and it's been advice like, probably the number one response that I got to was finding your unique competitive advantage. When I told the story that if you can't define in your industry, in your life, in a relationship, what is unique about it, what you like about it, what's better about it, then you're not in the right place in your business. And that's been a great response.
Okay, here's an anonymous question. No, it's not. It's become from Joe Barber at Clay Ray Lacey. What are your risks? Fast forward 3 years, demand for fractional on NetJets and FlexJets slips to pre-COVID levels. What would go wrong to make that happen?
So we wouldn't be surprised by it. So these contracts are 5 years. So it's not, and as probably any, if you look at the fractional business, what we like about it is it's a subscription business. During COVID, when we went from 200 flights a day to 8 flights a day, when I was actually on vacation with my youngest son, and I said to him, he goes, "Dad, you're up all night." I go, "Well, you're watching the end of Dad's business. Years from now, we will say, how did Dad's business end?" And you will say, "I was in Cabo, and we watched it end that night." But our fear, we didn't care that people were flying 8 flights. The question was, would they start to redeem their shares? Okay? Because so we see that coming, and there's a lead time to it. So if all of a sudden sales went flat, okay, well, CNBC would be disappointed, and all of our advertising people would be disappointed, but the business lives on the subscription, on the monthly subscription revenue. During 2008, when the world was in financial turmoil, you would think we were going to have this run on the bank, that people were going to come in. But what was happening was nobody was trading. So someone came in and said, "What's the value of my Citation 10 work?" You couldn't find a value. So for the repurchase price, you had to kind of guess on the market. Our owners are very intelligent. They don't catch a falling knife. They said, "Well, I'm not going to put my share to you now. I'm going to just wait to see if the market changes." So you're much more aligned with them, and I think we get much more nervous. Hours under management, the hours that we get repaid, that we get paid for on a monthly basis, is the most important metric that we see every day. Okay, the pipelines, the backup, the pipeline in the sales department is important, but I think it would be difficult, but it wouldn't be terminal in any way, shape, or form to see sales. In fact, what we would say is not that sales end, but they would not increase. See, right now, we have customers that mature in 5 years and they rebuy. So we don't know at the end of 5 years if they're going to rebuy or not. So, but most of them do. 95% of them do. The ones that don't are usually dead. But most of them do. And what you would say is, are we going to grow above that, or will renewals decline below where they are?
Okay, Sean Dinning from Dallas Jet is saying, what does the industry do about MROs projecting aviation labor costs of $300 an hour?
Well, I think you come to directional and you look for seed capital. I think like I mentioned, I think that the airline industry has given us a map that it's difficult, right? You have to find your way into the repair manual business. You can't just go out there and say we're going to do it for less per hour. That's not the market. The market is to find a niche. You can do landing gear overhauls on G650s because you've made the effort to make the investment in what it takes to do that overhaul. And believe me, if you do them at $300,000 a year, you'll make plenty of money. You don't have to charge $500,000 a year.
In the last few years, we've seen you.
And by the way, and the end of it is that, like, NetJets, FlexJet, we see the bow wave of what's coming in maintenance. So we would seed that capital, right? We would do that. We would seed it knowing, because we're going to operate these airplanes. Our airplane life cycle is 15 years. 5 years on its first run of fractional, second redo for 5 years, and then we kind of put the asset into sentient support, core fleet support, and then we sell the asset.
And in the last few years, we have seen you go out and buy, maintenance businesses. We've seen you go out and buy completions businesses. So you out buying now?
Yes. I mean, we believe what we did is 3 years ago, we forecasted our maintenance. And the number that came out was we were going to need 700,000 man hours in 2023. And if you try to go out and buy 700,000 man hours of maintenance, it's next to impossible. But we would pay any price for it. What we can't afford to pay for is too long downtime. So our model is so different. A down plane for us costs $31,000 a day. So when someone calls us and says, I can do an overhaul exchange, it's in 3 days, and I can do it for $4,000. Or I can put a new part on the plane for $20,000 and do it today. We say do it today. So our model is different than what the average aircraft operator is looking at. But looking at that, so we had 2 problems. One was we could never get prioritized by the maintenance facility because they were going to stick us in wherever they had time. They were never going to work Saturdays. We have a 3-day weekend shift that is the most popular shift. It's 3 12s. You get paid for 40, and you do it every other weekend. Okay, because none of our planes fly on Saturday. So that's what maintenance provider could I go to? So 700,000 hours. We need Saturday work, and we need the mindset to be not overhaul exchange, but what's the shortest time I can get the plane out? So by necessity, we needed to build it ourselves. So today, we have 1,400 techs in our maintenance department, spread over 10 different facilities, 3 completion centers, and we have 40 AOG vans that circulate around the country, and so we just took the mindset we're going to have to do it ourselves. We can't be reliant on private equity.
Someone else is asking, how's your partnership with Ferretti Group gone? You're doing more and more on the sort of yachts and tailoring and luxury.
Well, here's what I learned. It's been a great partnership, and it's a great brand. I've learned a lot about branding from them, which has been very good. I've also learned, because we went into Europe, international for us began because Americans wanted to use our product in Europe. It's not that we looked around and said, man, we don't have enough French clients. Let's get over there to Paris. What we had was our owners wanted to use it there. And then once you're there, then you start to look at the marketplace, right? But after we were there for a while, there was really no gaining traction. Europe is it's a club. And the Americans don't really belong to the club, even when your grandparents lived there 100 years ago. They don't think you're part of the club. So the Ferretti Group was part of becoming in the social network to be part of that club. But what I did learn is that everybody buys the plane first and the boat last. Nobody buys the boat, then looks for the plane. So it's probably more of a branding and experiential for FlexJet than it really is kind of a great lead source.
Okay, I think we've got someone pitching you. On the topic of maintenance, what would a predictive maintenance software that can detect chronic defects and provide guided troubleshooting be worth to you?
Is there a software that would detect defective pilots?
I think there is.
Because if you, and I'm being flippant a little bit, but the reality is, what you really need is about 30% of our breaks at departure are do not duplicates, could not duplicate, right? So I don't know if there's a software that could anticipate that we're going to need to reset the GPSs. I mean, it's just it would be interesting, but of course we would love any maintenance that does that. We have today on almost 60% of our fleet the real uplink and downlink in flight. So it transmits exactly what the plane is doing in every time. We had an observation in our safety department. We have 27 people in our safety department, and we had an observation about high approach speeds in smaller jets. And it seemed intuitively correct. You have your more junior pilots were flying. It's actually one of the reasons we took our minimums to 3,000 hours. They used to be 1,500 hours. Now our minimums are 3,000. But the lighter jets, they were coming in at a higher approach speed. And so you could put out a memo and tell everybody, watch your ref speeds on final. Maybe they hear you, maybe they don't. But when you can real time watch them do it, and when someone could navigate through and train through that, it's been a phenomenally, so it has been a great software program for us for that. If there was one in maintenance, you know where I live.
Do you see AI playing a major role with your aircraft?
God help us, yes. So we already have it. So we have text to book right now. So you can actually text in your trip and never talk to a person in owner services.
How many people use that?
About 20%.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's already there. 120 people in our IT department. If I ask them, what are we doing with AI? They go, it's going to be unbelievable, Mr. You won't imagine. Well, what's it going to do? You can't imagine. I know I can't imagine. Can anybody kind of imagine? So I'm waiting.
Anthony Bonhomme saying, with FBO consolidation, is hangar rash a growing cause of concern moving forward?
Well, I've been mean to the private equity firms, and I'm going to be nice to them. I actually think they've done a great job at safety in terms of our hanger rash is actually down. But man, when it happens big. Like, I mean, they taxi the wingtip off or something. I mean, it's not like they scrape the paint. But no, the reality is our overall hanger rash is declined.
Going through, going back over the investments you've made, are there any you regret selling? Like, wouldn't you love to have an FBO chain or, simulation you've done was a fantastic deal, but Simcom, but
yeah.
Does part of you wish you'd kept all of it?
I regret everything I've sold. If it was up to me, I wish I'd never sold anything. I actually think that buying and investing and growing is much more fun than selling. Selling is kind of like you have this fun day for a minute, and then there's a lot of zeros, and then that's it. There's like nothing to do the next day. There's no enthusiasm. There's not something fun, all you have to, so I do like buying. So I wish I didn't sell any of them. The problem is, like with the FBO business, I was only a 20% owner, so it wasn't my decision. But I remember Mike and I have been married for Mike Rossi and I have been married for 43 years, and the reason we stay married is because whenever anybody comes to us and says, I have an idea, I always go, I love it, and Mike goes, it's horrible. And that's how every conversation starts. So when we go to sell businesses, I go, Mike, I don't want to sell it. He goes, oh no, we got to sell it. So that's how every sale begins. So when it came time to sell what's now Atlantic Aviation in 2007, by the way, I made the pitch to my partner that we take a larger interest, that we keep it, and by that time, that was the first deal that traded at 15 times, which is kind of now the norm, and 15 times projected. And the partner said, we'll never see numbers like this again. This is a once in a lifetime. And I said, aviation's growing. We're going to need more of these FBOs. It's not, it's a phenomenal business. I couldn't get them not to sell it. So that was one. No, I wish we did have that one.
Although in 2008 you were quite happy.
Well, yes, but I was wrong. Mike was right.
What would you, if someone in the room is looking at, it feels like the barriers are hard. Is there room for another fractional?
Well, like I said, the problem is the staying power takes a long time. If it's 150 aircraft to profitability, I mean to see reasonable profitability, I'm talking about $100 million profitability. It's just a long road, and so I think as much as I love that we outsell NetJets about 2-1 last year. We'll never catch them. They have 600 planes and we have 300. So let's see. If we outsell them 2-1 in about 150 years, I'll catch them. I mean, it's not. So that's the first mover advantage. But the market's getting bigger, and so there'll be more operators, and so bring people in. I mean, I've always been. I say this to our whenever I talk to our group. We don't need our competitors to fail for us to succeed. Don't ever think about that. We compete with ourselves. So I want more people in the industry. I think it exposes people to it. We get a lot of NetJets clients who would never leave NetJets, but it's a long game. And so please, anything we can do to bring people into this industry, let's do it.
And you're going international. I know you've been international for a while. You've got amazing new offices in London, which are worth a visit. But you're really committing to international for the next few years. Yeah.
So what happens is once we went to Europe, and people were starting to fly here to Europe, you needed a customer. The fractional works, right, is we don't want deadheads, and you only pay for the occupied leg. So if I have 15 flights only going this way across the Atlantic, I need somewhere to have flights to come back across the Atlantic. So by necessity, we have to sell into Europe for people that want to come to America. Well, I don't know where my Middle Eastern friends are, but that market is on fire. And if you've been there or if you haven't been there, it's an amazing market that's growing. I hadn't been there in 20 years. I've been there several times lately. And many of our, in fact, Ferretti, who you brought up, their number one destination, because we do all their flying, is into the Middle East. That's where they're selling boats. The Middle East is becoming an amazing market. And guess so, our European customers are all going one way into the Middle East. So by default, it forces us to end up in the Middle East. Once we're there, I don't know where those customers will go, but we almost have to follow when the customer goes. So yeah, it's not that it's not that I'm saying we have to be international. I'm really just following where the customer is going and working the model back off of that.
Okay, going back to talking about selling businesses. Last time you were on stage, you were going to do a SPAC.
Yes.
You must regret.
Not doing it?
Yeah.
It was the biggest mistake ever. I had no idea. So it cost me $30 million to not do the transaction. And I
A lot of other people have lost a lot more.
Well, I didn't look at it from yes, I look, two things came violently to life. Number one was I never had one owner call me up and say, congratulations, you're going to be public. They all called to say, have you lost your mind? And they said, are you aware of the disclosures? Are you aware of that? So that was number one. But the one that really struck home is when you start to go through the filings, and everything when you go public is about explaining to amateurs what the potential risks are. So you start telling, what could go wrong with the business. Well, in case you're not in the marketplace, which I am every day, here's how the sales pitch goes today. I'm Warren Buffett. I have all the money in the world. Who the hell is Ken? All right? We bring people in and say, we have 300 planes. We have the best pilots. Come visit us in our ops center and see who we are. But their play always is you're not financially stable like Warren Buffett. And I was just going to give them fodder in those filings that would have showed them all the chinks in the armor, and they would have construed, they could have marked, and I just began to believe it was going to be a horrible to sell into that marketplace.
And I think it was the right decision to put.
I was wrong and happy.
Okay, anyone in this room, we've talked about PMA parts. You'll buy as many PMA parts as people in this room manufacture.
Help you fund your business, yes.
If anyone's setting up a new FBO chain, where else?
We're in.
You're in. Where else should people be looking?
Caterers.
Okay.
Catering. Engine overhaul work. Okay. It's not as, having re-engined aircraft before, it's not as it's complicated. But the other thing is, I know I wasn't kind to private equity, but there's a ton of it out there. And so remaking an engine program when we did it at Nextent was about a $20 million investment. Today, it's probably a $50 to $70 million investment. But average checks are 50 to 7. I mean, $100 million checks are very popular. And so great ideas into our marketplace, into a great marketplace, funding is there.
So just to confirm, if a private equity company agrees with your thesis, you like them?
I do, yes.
And
because there's good assassins and bad assassins.
Okay, finally, what's your prediction for the next 12 months?
In the
industry?
I think we're going to have a downside surprise. And I don't know, that's the thing about downside surprises, we don't know what they are. Okay, but I would tell you, I started off by saying business is good but paranoid. I think, and by the way, downward environments are great, but it's been too strong for too long. And so I think things are a little frothy, and I think there's going to be I think there's going to be some downward move. Now, we have a backlog through June, July, and planes are coming a little later because manufacturers are slower to deliver. So whether we catch up or not and whether that backlog dissipates, it's possible. I would just tell you that I'm a little paranoid going into next year.
And that's not the mood we want going into the
Now,
cocktail.
on the other hand, I'm very excited about next year. I think it's going to be a great year.
Trying to salvage some optimism. Real optimism. OEMs are in a very different position compared to, say, 2008, which must give you some comfort. It doesn't feel like we've had the massive oversupply of aircraft.
No, I think the most exciting thing about where OEMs are today, where manufacturers are, is I'm hearing more and more chatter about the next generation of aircraft, and that's exciting. And you know what it's going to be? We're getting rid of windows. I've seen 2 or 3 different proposals now that are starting to eliminate the cabin windows. quieter. It's you can use virtual reality to make the sidewall look exactly like, look, if there's a window there, you can make it a picture window, you can make it a movie screen, and there's a lot of these in development. So, but there's not, I don't think we're all going to buy new airplanes because they don't have windows, but I think you're starting to hear all the manufacturers, and this time the fractionals are being included in the thought process of what's the next generation come, and all of them have something exciting thinking about what's coming next.
It does also allow you to take away the whole side of the aircraft and scare them.
Yeah, you could pretend on the roller coaster, right? Just floor to ceiling window.
Okay.
Skylight.
Finally, when are you going to retire?
I am retired. I am retired. This is what I'll do. I do. I'm not being. I don't know. This is what I like to do. I get to spend every day in a business I love and am passionate about, and so this is a retirement.
And on that cheery note, thank you so much.